Now this is Dr. Pope. That's just a little snippet of her report, because I just wanted to read basically her findings to you. She said that that's easier if I just read it. The fire that burned this victim's body is consistent with a single burn event where the fire was set and left to burn as a slow rendering fire. And then for some reason it says in parentheses hours. That remained undisturbed until discovered as a crime scene on July 5th. The duration of the fire was less than 24 hours old. You'll remember from her testimony, she made that assumption based upon how hot the fire was when law enforcement arrived on July 5th, somewhere around 1 o'clock or so, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, whatever that is. Now the important thing is, that 24 hours. I also wanted to point out, so post testimony that Gary's remains are in that state of cremation, being on the burn pile 24 hours or less. Okay. You remember from those interviews you were hearing where Kuykendall and Hayes are talking to Melody, saying that we've seen people come out of house fires. We've seen people die in collapsed house fires, and they don't look that bad. They're not burned up like that. According to the sheriff's office, they don't even believe their own expert. Because she said it happened in less than 24 hours. And not a house fire, an open pit just laying there, burning. And also, no accelerants, no gas, no alcohol, no nothing. Now, the reason that 24 hours I've always thought was curious. So, if the fire was 24 hours old, 24 hours old when they arrived on July 5th, 1, 2 o'clock, that means that the fire had to be set less than 24 hours or less before. So that'd been 1 or 2 o'clock on July 4th. Common math. Actually went over that with Pope, and she agreed. Because I do remember. I was crossing here and it was 1:09, if you'll recall. I was like, it is 1:09 p.m. right now. 24 hours ago, it was the day before at 1:09 p.m. and she said yes. So trauma.
So is it fair to say you had a specialty within forensic anthropology?
Yes.
What would that be? What focus would that be on?
Mostly burn bone, but also how the human body burns during different types of fire events.
And have you performed experiments on cadavers with fire?
Yes. So my research that I've been doing since 2000, four, for several years. Basically, I test on human cadavers. So we put them in structures, in vehicles, in outdoor scene conditions, and this is for law enforcement training. So we're able to show them how the body burns in those different environments, as well as outdoors, confined space and others. And so we document time, temperature, photography, sometimes video, so we can see all the stages from start all the way to finish when the fire is put out, which could be minutes, it could be, an hour, 2 hours. It just kind of depends. So we kind of test all the different ranges and figure out how the human body burns in those different types of fire environments.
What would be the number of bodies that you've burned throughout the years?
I'm up to about 270. It's part of a training course that we do each summer out in California, and we do, it's a law enforcement training course for about 65 investigators from all over the country. We get people international as well, and we average about 15 to 17 bodies a year that we do fire investigation training on.
Before we get into the details of this case, can you explain to the jury generally, if you could, how a body will burn, the process of that once it is, I guess, for lack of a better term, set on fire?
Yes. So the body is layered in tissues. It's got skin. It's got, underneath that is going to be subcutaneous fat. Underneath that is going to be muscle. And then you have organs. And then my specialty is the bones inside. And so each different tissue burns differently. The skin is really thin, So when it's exposed to heat, it'll start to shrink and pull apart into little skin splits. And this exposes the next layer of tissue, which is going to be subcutaneous fat. Now, subcutaneous fat burns as a fuel source. It is a lipid material, and it turns into basically grease. And it'll fuel the fire, especially if it's absorbed into wood, clothing, anything that will retain that. And so that is a major contributing factor in this case, as well as my experiments in terms of after setting the fire, the body can actually burn on its own rendered fat, liquefied fat, for several hours, just as the main fuel source, even after ignitable liquids have been expended.
I want to walk through your report here. Did you have a recorded temperature at the time of the discovery of the body?
It was mentioned at about 100 to 230 degrees Fahrenheit.
Was that helpful for you to start your analysis of possibly the time that Mr. Farris had been on the burn pile?
Yes, so the fact that there was still heat and temperature there just lets me know that it was a more recent event, in that the fire was able to go out on its own, but it was still warm. If it had been cold, that could extend the time period. But in this case, the coals were recorded at a low temperature, so that kind of lets me know that it's a more recent event, under 24 hours, as opposed to later on.
And had those temperatures been lower, or like cold ambient, that would have done what with the time frame?
It would just expand it potentially. Basically just the warm coals just kind of put it at a lower or a shorter time frame.
And does the fuel sources surrounding the body, or under the body, or over the body also depend on how long that may have been burning?
Yes, absolutely. So the more fuels in the fire, the longer it's going to burn. If there was just a few little, pieces of wood, it wouldn't burn quite as long. But in this case, there were pieces of wood at the crime scene. And so that kind of gives me an idea of the potential fuels that were there, not the exact amount. But with the wood being there, that's going to absorb the fat, and that's going to keep the fire going and fuel the fire for a long period of time, over several hours. It was reported that it was still warm.
Still warm. And you state in your report that you don't have an exact timeline, but you state somewhere less than 24 hours.
Yes.
Okay. So if law enforcement is recording the fire around, let's say 1 p.m., right? Less than 24 hours would be the next day at 1 p.m., or that would be exactly 24 hours.
Okay.
Okay. Is that right? In 24 hours? Like 24 hours from now, 24 hours from now will be 1:09 tomorrow.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah. So if I go back in time, trying to calculate something else, 1:09 yesterday would be 24 hours.
Yes.
Right? All right. So the fire was started or was recorded on July the 5th around 1 p.m. That would mean less than 24 hours would be July the 4th at 1 p.m. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you also state that you didn't find from the photographs any evidence of stirring or stroking or anything like that.
Not based on how the remains were found.
Okay. Now, that's what I want to show you. Did you review Dr. Gooding's documentation? She did the anthropological report.
Yes.
Okay. She also attached with that a photograph, a chart. And it's been admitted into evidence as Gooding 1. Can you see that on your screen?
Yes.
Did you review that chart?
No.
Well, you were provided her report, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what it says, and I was talking to her. It was an eyewitness, in this case, that previously had testified that he observed flames from the burn pile on July the 3rd, later in the day.
Get my notes real quick.
Would knowing that information change your opinion about your report?
I mean, it's possible they could have started, had another fire earlier. I'm not sure.
Okay. But it's still your opinion that this fire was less than 24 hours old?
Yes, simply because it was still warm. If it had been cold, then we could extend the time frame.
Okay. All right. So 1 or 2 o'clock, law enforcement's there. fires burning less than 24 hours old. Well, at 1:54, Melody is an hour away on the 4th of July, verified at Lake Lanier. So we know that it's about an hour or more on a major holiday to Lake Lanier. Amanda said traffic was horrible. Getting in was horrible. Also know Melody went to Target, had to go buy the chair. We don't know exactly when she left, but through the state's expert, it seems like less than 24 hours, unless you just want to say, well, less than 24, maybe it was 10, maybe it was 5, whatever. Use your common sense there. But if you put it around the time of 24 hours when that fire was started, according to their expert, Melody's in Lake Lanier. She wasn't even on the property. And that is verified by that receipt, that is verified by Amanda, that is verified by Cameron as well, that Melody wasn't at Purcell Lane, that she was at Lake Lanier.